Looking to develop your presentation skills and really deliver powerful presentations in front of an audience, whether live in person or here online, but you're worried about that perfectionism and not having everything just right. Well, you're going to want to stick around for today's episode because we're going to help you with that. So that way you can show up as yourself and the best version of yourself here online as well as in person. So let's dive into today's episode.
Can't say I never tried to warn you, and I'm just trying to tell you.
Welcome to the Live Advantage Show. I'm your host, Ed Troxel from edtroxel.com, where I help make video marketing super easy for you. That's right, I make it super easy for you to show up, deliver, and engage with your audience here online through live streaming video. And today's episode, we have two special guests. That's right, two, which we're going to bring on in just a moment to talk about presentations and how you can remove that layer of perfectionism that we all face and that we all have just sitting right there on our shoulders. So that way you can start showing up more online, in person, wherever it is that you're trying to increase your presence and really speak to your audience. You know, the stage is everywhere now, and it's a place where you get to shine. And so we're going to be talking about that. Before we dive into today's episode, first I want to let you know that this episode is sponsored by my program, Real Estate Agents Go Live. Real estate agents, if you are looking to get more listings through live streaming video, that's right, learning how to use live streaming video to attract and nurture your clients, then you're going to want to check out realestateagentsgolive.com. That's where all the information is for learning more about using live streaming video to not only get more listings and more time back, but also for you to really become the go-to agent in the areas that you serve using live streaming video. Now, let's go ahead and dive into today's episode and welcome in our guests. Hello. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Ed.
Great to be with you, Ed.
Go ahead and introduce yourselves to the audience, and then we'll dive into today's conversation.
You go first, Rose.
All right. Thank you, Phil. Ever polite. My name is Rose Bloomfield. I'm a communication specialist, normally based in Los Angeles, California, though today I'm joining all of you from gorgeous San Miguel de Allende in Mexico, thanks to our virtual working world. And my colleague, Phil Waknell, he hired me out of many when I was living in Paris to join Ideas on Stage as a communication coach based on my hybrid experience with some business in Silicon Valley and my work growing up on television. And I have a lot of experience of presenting, but without methodology. And Phil and our team has brought in the method to the madness. And that's why I'm here.
I love it.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rose. And so from my point of view, so I am Phil Waknell. So I founded Ideas on Stage together with my co-founder, Pierre Morsa, back in 2010. Prior to that, I was in business. I worked for Procter & Gamble for many years, and then I was a sales manager or sales director at Hewlett-Packard. So that has a California connection too there. And then basically we started Ideas on Stage with the mission to fix presentations once and for all, because business presentations in particular, but also academic presentations, most of them are broken. Most of them are not delivered well. Most of them don't have a great story. Most of them do not have great slides. That is what animates us at Ideas on Stage, and we're delighted to have people in different countries. Ed, you already know Andrea, who runs our operations in the UK. So I sound a lot English, but I can speak French if you want. And so I'm based in the Paris area. We've got Rose in LA, and we're both delighted to be here with you today, Ed, to be talking about all things presentations.
I love it. And you both brought up such a great point when you're talking about Ideas on Stage here is the broken presentations that people are experiencing and how you can fix them. So let's talk a little bit about what do people realize when they're broke? Like, how should I say this? For the presentation here, as you can see, when it comes to presentations, what's something that is kind of a indicator that it's broken? How would somebody know that their presentation is broken?
Generally, you look at your audience, and if your audience is kind of like not really there, or kind of being tired, or not really paying attention, if they're not like smiling and going, then that's the first thing. You can see it in their eyes. And it's the same with leadership. You can see that in your people's eyes if they are not really enthusiastic about joining you. So it's all about them. And I think the really first thing to remember is it's all about your audience. It's their presentation, so make it special for them.
Yes. Yeah, I'm going to add to that. And I'll use myself as an example in my introduction. So, and this is because our conversation today is about being personal and not perfect. I could have over polished presenting myself. And frankly, I could have made it a little bit more connected to the audience here to say, not so much about my background, but really that what I do today is work with leaders who actually, many of them are excellent public speakers. So to the people listening today, you might be a great public speaker, but you might be dealing with a lot of internal feedback and disconnect from yourself and the audience. So I got a little nervous starting the show today. And instead of connecting with who we're talking to, started talking about myself. And that's a common pitfall, right? Instead of really going for people who are here today, want to know how to present themselves better, whether that's online or in person, want to feel more at ease communicating and more enjoyment communicating, because we all have to. And that's where we could have started. So I'll keep using examples from my life and my client's life here.
Yes. And I love that you bring that up, because as we all just experienced, I messed up too. Like in my talking, I was thinking, wow, we are on this live and we're talking about presentation and improving your presentation skills. And I totally butchered that beginning part. And I was like, it is what it is, right? I just keep going. I can't let that mindset hold me back from showing up.
Yes, exactly. Go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, I think one of the really important things to bear in mind is that trying to be perfect is a no-win situation. There is no such thing as a perfect presentation. I mean, God, over the last 20 years, I've given, I don't know how many presentations, never given a perfect one yet. There's always something that I think I could have done better. But if you search for perfection, then you won't achieve it. If you search for connection, that you can do. And as long as you have a connection with your audience, and as long as your audience realizes you care about them and you're putting yourself out there, you're just being yourself, you're being authentic, then they actually won't mind if you mess something up or you fluff a line and you basically, I got that one wrong, let me start that sentence again. They won't mind. They probably won't even notice. They'll just accept that you're human.
And not only will they not notice, but I think what's really important here, Phil said the word, which is connection. And the aiming not for perfect, but for personal actually falls under the 5th stage of our preparation practice through Ideas on Stage. And Phil is releasing a book in July that is going into depth about these 5 stages of preparation. So we'll come back to that. But under this 5th stage, after you've gotten to know your audience, after you've thought about your transformational objective with that communication that you're going to be delivering, and after you've developed something that you feel proud about, then you kind of got to let it go. And you show up and you are yourself. And that's how you make the connection. And this makes me think, I was preparing for today and asking myself, what helps me feel most at ease being myself? And how do I get over the hump of not trying to be too polished, right? So that I come across, because the fear in our minds is, I need to look good enough so I can be convincing, so that I can sell, so that I can show up for my company, represent them well, make a decent living, feed my family. It gets down to survival kind of quickly. And that triggers our reptile brain. And then the fight, flight, freeze response kicks in. So how do we pull back and zoom back from going into that spiral? And one way is through beauty and acceptance. And my dad has an analogy That is, we are all like a pearl. We're all like a pearl. And a pearl is made how? It's not by some magic spell that's then voila, perfection, this spherical, gorgeous, luminescent being. It all starts with a piece of grit, dirt, something imperfect, something hurt, something broken, some shard that got into the pearl and the oyster, excuse me. And because of that grit, the oyster plays with it and builds on it and builds on it and builds over it. And then you get this gorgeous pearl. And so his saying to me is always, don't try to extract the grit. So we have to accept the things that we do that are imperfect. And that's what makes it beautiful. And that's how we make our connection with people.
Wow, that is awesome. That is a fantastic story. And that just ties into so much for so many things that we all do as entrepreneurs, as business owners, as employees of companies. If you're tuning in and you're listening to this and you're working on a company, that all ties in, and it reminds us that we all have to start somewhere and we have to build from there. And everything that we do helps build those layers to the next thing that we're going towards. I love that. And how about when it comes to, both of you are communication specialists, and what gives the courage to be more imperfect in front of online audiences for each of you, for being able to just step out and start talking to people? Because you're the heads here, and you're the experts, and that, as we talked about, can be still a little nerve-wracking in the beginning parts as well.
Let me take the first piece of this one then. The first thing I would say is, remember the words of Mark Twain. He said that there are only two classes of orators in the world: the nervous and the liars. So Rose and I have been presenting for like years. Rose has been on TV. I've been on a TEDx stage and stuff like that. We know presentations, we know communication, but we still get nervous. Right, we've been nervous when we were coming online to speak with you today, Ed, because we don't know what questions you're going to ask us, and there's always those nerves. So remember that first. We all get nervous. But then the second thing I would say is, what we can try to do is to learn to channel that as energy instead of stress. So it's a question of saying, okay, I do feel nervous. I feel like the energy is coming up there, right? Okay, now I just need to make sure that I'm in charge of it and it's not in charge of me. And one key way to do that is to prepare really well. It doesn't mean that you actually learn your lines off by heart and then deliver them exactly as you learned them. A presentation is not Shakespeare. But the more you've prepared, the easier it is to improvise and to come up with new ideas and to, it's a colloquial term, but to riff off your audience. One of the best ovations I ever got from an audience was from something I had not planned to say, but where I was just reacting to how I perceived them and improvised something, and they applauded in the middle of a presentation, which I didn't expect. But if you've properly prepared, and if you've prepared yourself physically and mentally, well, then you can be in the moment and you really can make that connection. And that's where the magic happens.
Oh, Ed, go ahead.
Real quick, Rose, before you jump in, I want to just mention, I love that you shared that it's not having word for word every line from your script, because that's something that I talk a lot about, with live streaming, is that when I'm teaching people how to go live and what to talk about, it's not that you need a script. Even if you feel like you do, that's not what you want, because you don't want to be so scripted that you're like, wait, I lost myself. I'm on line 4 and I just said line 10. And then you just get too much in your head. So it's really about knowing your topic, having those talking points, and being able to just roll with it. Because like you said, there's going to be those unexpected moments that come up where you're going to want to interact with your audience, and you're going to want to be able to talk about XYZ as it pertains to what the audience is wanting. So perfect segue there. Rose, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I love what you just added onto that, Ed. So what I wanted to speak to, because you asked about courage, what gives us courage, right, to show up on stage? I would say one other piece, this is in after you've done phase one and you've gotten to know your audience and why they're there and what the context of your presentation is. Then you start to think about your transformational objective, which essentially is your why. And that why is, as Simon Sinek has made an incredible impact in the world through this emphasis. When we have a strong intention to be somewhere, even if that is, my intention is to turn the lights on in my audience's eyes, right? That's one thing that I work on with clients is I have one young leader, female, who works in science, and she speaks with PhD researchers and professional researchers all the time. She often deals with the imposter syndrome. And one thing that comes up for her is, how does she get into that zone of passion when she's feeling more frightened about coming across as less educated or less informed? And so one of the goals that I give her to get that courage to have the conversation again and again, and not only the courage, but actually moving courage to desire, is to play the game of turning on the lights. And so her intention at the beginning of the call with these researchers is getting the lights on in their eyes. And then the mirror neurons kick in and you create this virtuous circle of, okay, they're excited, I'm excited, we're excited. And then we're starting to get into passionate territory. One last thing that I'll add in terms of courage and also preparation to underscore what Phil was talking about. You don't need to be perfectly rehearsed. You actually, we really work with TEDx speakers to not know just word for word, but as an actor, you learn beat by beat, which is essentially taking your big why and breaking it down into teeny tiny whys, right? And so you've got all these little bitty whys that you're working through. And then if you miss a transition, you just come back to, right, what am I doing here? That's right, I needed to let them know this because of that. And it gets you back in the path. So instead of polished and perfect, I'm going to give you a couple other P's.
Yes.
If you prepare, then just work on punctuating your point and pausing to let it in. So not only is the pausing going to be important for your audience to be able to keep up with you and keep that connection, but it's also going to let you breathe. Just going to bring you back from your head into your body. And then you're in connection with yourself and it brings everything back into life. And it helps move the nerves through so that you're staying in excitement and you're staying grounded and present. So that's another P. If you can just prepare, then punctuate and pause to stay present, then you can keep that connection going.
Yes. Oh, those are amazing P's, and I have got to say, I love that you brought up the pausing and taking just that breath, because that's something that I also work on with clients, is teaching them to not go so fast when they're talking, because one, it, just like you said, having that break just allows you to ground yourself and reset basically to what you're doing. But also in my case, because we're talking about live video, it's a great tip for those listening. When you take those breaks, it not only helps you calm yourself and have that moment, but it's also great for any editing that you do after you're live. It allows you to do a clean edit so that you can repurpose your video somewhere else without having this blah, 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 and then you can't cut anywhere. So just a fun tip out there for you guys.
It's a good tip as well, though. I mean, pausing is so important. I mean, the analogy that I use is often too many people will use their presentation as if it's like a high-speed train. So they'll be speaking really, really quickly and they'll never actually leave a pause because the train never actually stops. It's going all the way from its origin to its destination. It's never actually going to stop. And then guess what? Non-native speakers are going to find it really hard to understand you. But then even native speakers might find it a bit difficult if you're going to be speaking like that really fast train. What you need to imagine is it's a bit more like a subway, where it's not going to go that fast and it stops regularly. And therefore those pauses accentuate what you've said on what you're about to say. And it gives you a chance to breathe. It allows your audience to breathe. And breathing is so important when you're presenting.
Yes, so key. And let's talk a little bit more about some presenting tips. So I know that we had mentioned before the show a little bit about coffee. So let's talk about that. And also positioning, meaning, sitting versus standing, and maybe some other tips that can help those who are tuning in with what they can do for their presentations during those times that they're speaking, whether it's on stage in person or here online.
Well, you mentioned coffee. Why don't I jump in with the coffee one? Now, look, I mean, Ed, you love coffee. I love coffee. I'm a big fan of good coffee. But when I'm going to be speaking in public, I don't have coffee. And there are several reasons for this. But I mean, I actually gave a training course several years ago at a coffee company here in France. And I dared to tell them, you don't have a coffee before a presentation. I thought they were going to throw me out, but they didn't, right? They were like, all right, well, you give us your reasons and we'll give you ours. And so I gave my reasons. So coffee, firstly, it actually can cause a stress response. So a lot of research has been done on this. If you have caffeine plus a stressful situation like speaking in public or online, then you get a cortisol response, which is not good for you. It can actually trigger that fight or flight response that we talked about earlier on. And that means that if you're on stage or if you're on a virtual stage like this and you get fight or flight, then that's not going to be good for your audience. So coffee is not good for that. Second, not only the caffeine, but also the tannins in coffee can dry out your mouth and your throat. That's where your voice is supposed to resonate. And that means that you might have a dry voice and you might actually have trouble projecting your voice. And it's a lot of effort for a very bad result. And that doesn't give a lot of credibility to you, even if you've got a microphone. So also, last reason, well, coffee actually can make you ramble. And you don't want to be rambling. You want to use short sentences, straight to the point, because when speaking in public, short sentences are stronger. So I said all this to the coffee company, and indeed, I thought they were going to throw me out. And then actually they said, yeah, absolutely. But have a coffee after your presentation, but don't have one before. And so they fully agreed with it. You know what happened, though? This is a funny story. Then lunchtime came, and we had lunch, and then they said, Phil, you having a coffee? I said, were you listening this morning? And they said, well, you can't come to a coffee company and not have a coffee. And so I thought, all right, I'll have a coffee. But you will notice in about an hour from now, my voice will get noticeably weaker. And they did. So no coffee before you're presenting. You'll feel a lot calmer. You'll be able to channel your nerves and your voice will be better too.
Love that.
Yeah, I think I won't further that point around coffee specifically, but one way, so tips for presentation, precisely, water is our friend. Tips in terms of staying calm and connection. I remember I had one job while I was in Paris with our team, with a large aeronautic company. And I was going to be on stage presenting as a host for an event in front of about 200 of the most senior executives of the company. I was 31 years old at the time. I was an English speaker. I'm a young woman. I tend to look a little young, especially at a distance. So all of my imposter stuff could have come way up, right? Like here I am, majority men, extremely educated, etc.
Yeah.
So I absolutely did not want to touch coffee that day because I had more than enough energy, right? Already my stress response was going to be available to me. Luckily, in terms of preparation, the company was really, really good with events and they knew the benefit and the importance of having rehearsal the day before as well as the day of. So I was already feeling really clear. My mind was formatted. I understood my needs. What were my goals? Could I achieve success? I felt connected to the AV team. So for people who are presenting, right, you want to know the people that are working to help you succeed. know everything technically. I'm running a dry run for a virtual conference tomorrow where we're just logging onto Zoom and practicing introductions and conclusions, practicing asking the questions, passing the ball, just like a soccer practice, right? Who does what when? Once you know the basics, once you know the rules, you can improvise. Then you can trust whatever happens will flow. So coming back to that same event on stage, finally lights go on. I'm going to be hosting this event. In fact, their old CEO is on stage. This is all in celebration of this human being who's done incredible work. And the way that I know that I'm staying connected to my audience is also through the energy in my body. I was so excited. It was so fun, right? There's so much fun to be had when you are public speaking. So getting connected and not tapping out your nerves with caffeine or basically running on adrenaline because you haven't prepared enough. I fell into that category a lot in my early career with public speaking, showing up, and I kind of leaned very heavily on the personal side of it working. So for people who really trust their improv side, I implore you to check out what it feels like to prepare a little bit more and then see how good it feels and how calm and peaceful and satisfying that feels to show up on stage. And that event was a huge success. And there were flubs and there were things we needed to work out in the moment with a bug in my ear, working with AV. So all of that preparation to have the relationship set up ahead, to know the goals, to know what was priority to get done in the hour we had, helped us be successful in the event that was based a lot on improv.
Yeah, I love that. And I know we're getting close on time, so we'll have a few minutes towards the end here to kind of wrap things up. But before we get there, let me also ask you, Rose, because I feel like with Phil and I, it's probably a lot easier when we're just going on camera or on stage. We can, just run out there and just go. But I know that with women, a lot of my clients especially, they struggle with having to have everything perfect, right? The hair. I mean, let me tell you, I still do the hair thing too. Like, I don't like having messy hair or anything. Like, I'm not coming out on stage with a mohawk. I'm gonna make sure that things look presentable and stuff. But I know that a lot of people that I've worked with, and that comes up where, I don't have the hair and makeup set up. I don't have this and that. How have you helped people through that, or tips that you have around that?
That's a fantastic question. And it does seem like it could be trivial, but it really isn't. So here are a couple of basic success techniques that we offer to our female presenters. Phil also works with a lot of women and gives the same kind of tips. So some of these I've learned from him. One is avoid heels. And or if you are going to wear heels, especially for in-person events when you're standing, you want shoes you're very comfortable in. So I had a pair of heels that are just for stage that are super stable, because the last thing you want to do is add to your nerves or sense of trying and feeling some of that imposter syndrome with feeling imbalanced. So wear stable shoes you feel comfortable in. Kitten heels are fine if they're stable. You want some thickness in where the heel hits the ground so you feel connected to the ground. Secondly, if you're wearing a Madonna mic, you want to avoid dangly earrings. So these are just technical things that will throw you off in the moment, right? You show up on stage, you got this gorgeous dress, everything's working. Watch out for dangly earrings. So just thinking ahead first from the technical details. Are you comfortable? If there are lights on, is anything sheer? You don't want to have that moment where you're actually in your underwear on stage because you have something that's a little bit transparent when the lights hit you, right? So checking all of these things ahead. Then going for that Venn diagram overlap of comfort and feeling like yourself, but feeling fabulously like yourself. So do give a moment where you consider, is this me? Does this feel good? And is this who I want to be in the moment? So do you feel beautiful? And you don't need to be Shakira or have a makeup artist to feel like you are, on MTV or something. I have a little bit of mascara on. I have a little bit of blush. It's just like the basic to feel slightly enhanced, but you, right? Don't overdo it. And actually, the one thing I would say for not just women, but for everyone to feel ready, is self-care. And the first piece of that is sleep.
Yes.
We need sleep. You can't improvise well. You won't have resonance. You won't feel your best. You won't be ready to connect if you are literally gasping for energy. So take care of yourself.
Yes, that is huge. And Phil, I'll let you jump in if you need to on that one in just a second. With the earrings, especially for those who are doing live as well, whether it's Facebook Live or Zoom, if you're going to be wearing a microphone, same thing applies. Don't wear the dangly earrings next to it, especially if you're outside. Because yes, exactly, because it will hit against the mic and people aren't going to be able to hear you. So I love that you bring up that tip as well, because a lot of this stuff that we're talking about goes across stages, online or in person. It all applies the same. So that's awesome. Phil, anything else that you wanted to add to that one?
To that in particular, in terms of the advice specifically for women, probably not. I guess the one thing I would add in terms of microphones is maybe you might end up having like one of these tie clip microphones. These were invented for men because ties and shirts and stuff. And if you're wearing a polo shirt like you or I are, well, fine, you can just clip it onto there. If you're wearing like the plunging neckline, where do you clip it to? So make sure you know what kind of microphone you're going to have, and make sure you've got somewhere first to clip that microphone to, but also the box that it is going to be attached to. I have had situations where I've had women in beautiful figure-hugging dresses and nowhere to clip that to. We've actually had to unzip dresses and attach it to the back of a bra. You really don't want to have to do that. So plan what you're wearing based on what kind of microphone you have if you're on stage. But all of that actually goes for online presentations too.
Yeah, no, that is fantastic. And so we're getting close on time. I want to make sure that I give each of you last minutes here to have any other tips or points that you want to share with us. I know we briefly mentioned, Phil, you have a book coming out, so I do want to make sure we talk about that here as well. And Rose, why don't we start with you as we wrap up this episode, which I hate to wrap this up because we're doing so good and it's such great tips. But Rose.
Yes, absolutely. No, I can't wait for this book to come out. And if anything, I really am thinking about particularly the female speakers, but this goes for every speaker that already has so much experience, right? We were talking about aiming not for perfect, but for personal. To turn into the pleasure of public speaking. I want to add to this revolution that Phil is going to be pushing forward even further with the book in July by saying, be yourself. Be yourself. Be yourself. I am silly. I am out of the box. I say weird things on stage. I get hired again and again and again. It hasn't kept me from working. In fact, people love seeing people on stage. We've got AI that's going to be coming out our sleeves soon. So really seeing people's flaws, seeing each other's humanity, knowing what makes us excited, knowing what makes us nervous, knowing what makes us tick. If there's something I could say, it's just pull the veil back. If there's anything you're going to do to polish, it's simply be prepared. That is it. Then let it go. Let it rip. Have some fun. If not, what the hell are we doing it for? Right? So let's be ourselves. Passing it over to Phil to talk about the Business Presentation Revolution book.
Well, thanks for teeing that up for me there, Rose. Yeah, I mean, being yourself is so important. Oscar Wilde said, be yourself. Everyone else is already taken. I love to say, be yourself. Nobody can be you better than you. So just be the best version of yourself. Nobody wants to see some kind of typical presentation robot. I've learned this, I'm giving it, etc. We don't expect perfection. We just want to see a human being who is delivering something they care about to an audience that they care about. And if you show you care about your audience, then they will care about you and they will be listening to you. So this is one of the really key things. So I mean, in the book, so Business Presentation Revolution, and here is a mock-up of the cover. There we are. So this is coming out in July, and this is going to be covering 5 revolutions that we really need to be putting in. We've mentioned two already. We've mentioned the first one, which is like, it's not your presentation, it's theirs. So make it personal for them. The second one is, you're not there to inform them, you're there to transform people. So what do you want them to do after they've watched your video? What do you want them to feel? Because we're emotional beings. So talk to their feelings. What do they need to feel in order to do what you want them to do? And what do you need them to believe? And then you can think about, okay, now I need to work out what I'm going to say. What I'm not going to do is to fall into the PowerPoint trap. And we do that too often. I hope you don't do it too often with your online videos, but we do tend to get sucked into the PowerPoint trap. I need to prepare a presentation. I'm going to type my slides, and then maybe I might think what I'm going to say. Don't do that. Instead, work on your story before your slides. And you may find then that you don't actually need slides. The fourth revolution then is, well, don't mix Word and PowerPoint. Do not confuse slides with documents. Slides are not documents. Slides are visual aids that can help your audience to get what you're speaking about. Documents are something you might give them afterwards. Never ever give them slides as a handout. That you can't do the two birds with one stone. But then the fifth revolution, and this is so key, aim not for perfect, but for personal. And that's what we talk about today. And I think that's really the key. And the last tip I'm going to give, and this is in the book, and I hope you'll find a lot more tips in the book there, but this is really important. Visualize success. We're all too worried about what could happen if it goes wrong. What could happen if I forget my lines? What could happen if? No, what could happen if it all goes right? Imagine your audience loving what you're doing. Imagine them engaging, smiling, laughing, clapping, doing what you want them to do. Visualize that success and you're halfway there, and you'll feel so much better about it. And when you are calm, when you are serene, when you are able to be passionate and really clearly convinced about what you're saying, well, then you can be convincing, and then your audience will be passionate too. And so visualize that success, and you really are halfway there.
Ooh, that is so powerful, so powerful. And those who are tuning in, I have that information in the show notes so that you can check out the book when it comes out, as well as connect with Phil and Rose, because as you can see, they're amazing. Phil and Rose, stay around, stick around. I'm going to talk with you more backstage. Everyone else tuning in, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. As you heard here in this episode from other experts here, is that really it's about you visualizing it and being present. And like I always say, there's 3 keys to success. You got to show up, you got to deliver, and you have to engage. And those are 3 things that you can do and you will do when you start to visualize that. And remember that you got to show up for yourself, and then start showing up for your audience, and then everything just starts to fall into place. So be sure to check out the show notes, and we will see you back here next Tuesday at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Rose and Phil, thank you both so much for being here, and I will see everyone later. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Ted.
Bye-bye, folks.